Over the last decade or so, there's been a real attack on the legitimacy of scientists and science. And we saw that particularly with the Trump administration. And now we have the Biden administration, which is promising to do things differently. So we're going to talk to Dr. Gretchen Goldman, who's the research director for science and democracy at the Union of Concerned Scientists. Welcome to the interview, Gretchen.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, let's get your take on and I know you've made criticisms in other places about the Trump administration. What were they doing wrong?
What we saw was an unprecedented level of attacks on science across the board. From day one, the Trump administration came in and sidelined scientists. They suppressed scientific reports. They gagged federal scientists from talking to the media and the public. And we saw this across issue area, across federal agencies, so not just on politically contentious topics, but really looking everywhere science was disrupted at every turn.
So I guess one example would be, you come up with a policy like, we're going to open up a Bureau of Land Management lands to oil and gas drilling, and then they would ask to fit the science to the policy decision.
Yeah, we definitely saw some of that. We saw some sort of force fitting the science to meet whatever political agenda they had. We also saw a couple examples of straight up ignoring science, so allowing it to come out and then just disparaging it. So an example of this was the National Climate Assessment, which is a big assessment in the US on the state of climate science. And they let it come out unadulterated, but then, the president tweeted about how it was terrible and you shouldn't listen to it. So we saw also some of that as well.
Now, this has practical consequences because we've seen the skepticism by certain segments of the public increase towards science. That's got to be concerning for your organization.
Yeah, we are very interested in ensuring that science can effectively inform policy. And the way that we do that is by making sure that the science and the scientists that inform decision making are not hampered in any way, that science, free and independent of undue influence, is able to reach those that are making the decisions. And so the way we need to really protect science and scientists to get there, and we need an engaged scientific community as well to really ensure that happens.
Now, when I read President Biden's campaign climate policy and energy policy document, the legitimacy of science, listening to science through scientists, played prominently in that policy document. And how is it playing out now that the administration is in power?
It's been so exciting and refreshing to see the Biden administration so far really prioritize science and make clear that part of their plan is to elevate science and ensure that scientists can do their jobs. We've seen him start to do that by putting in place some qualified scientists in high-level roles and some of the policy priorities that he's set through executive orders. And so I'm hopeful that they'll be able to do a lot to restore the scientific challenges that we saw under Trump.
So we're seeing an improvement under the Biden administration. Do you think that new messaging, the new narrative, the new approach will filter down to the public's attitude towards scientists and science?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it will take a while for a lot of the public sentiments and ability of agencies to do their jobs. We saw a lot of censorship and fear under the Trump administration, and many were put off by that. So I think he has a lot of work to do to rebuild both confidence in government science and also restore people's trust in democracy and the ability to provide input into scientific decision making. So what my organization, the Union of Concerned Scientists, is doing is trying to ensure that the scientific community stays engaged as well, and make it clear that we have not just solved the problem by electing a science-friendly president. We need to also continue doing the work to ensure science can inform decisions.
Well, let's talk about the Canadian context for a moment, because we had from 2006 to 2015, we had a conservative prime minister who was often accused of being anti-science or unfriendly to scientists. And then elected a liberal government in 2015 that promised to be more science friendly, but then often comes under fire from environmentalists for being less, following, not being as scientist friendly as it should be. What's your take on that?
Right. I think we do see parallels between what happened under Prime Minister Harper and what happened under President Trump. And one thing that we noticed was when Trudeau came in, a lot in the scientific community in Canada were, more sat back and were sort of less engaged in ensuring that science and scientists had the proper protections they need to ensure that that kind of sidelining of science that we saw under Harper doesn't happen again. And so working on the US side, I'm very cognizant of wanting to avoid that and making sure that the scientific community does stay engaged and doesn't sit back and assume that problems are addressed, because we still need to get better policies on paper. We need to put in better practices and really rebuild what was damaged in the past 4 years.
Gretchen, thank you very much for this. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.